The Sanhedrin Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, enable commerce and deter malice, לנעול דלת בפני עושי עולה. We learned yesterday about the role of the legal system and how it's not to punish and it's not to enforce the laws in the normal sense of the world. The role of the legal system is given to us by the Torah, is to be able to enable the sanctity of the Shekhinah, of Hashem's presence, to be among our communities. Wherever there are 10 people, there needs to be a dayan, there needs to be a shofet, and the role of the shofet is to bring kedusha into the community. It's not just about the legal side of things. But what about today where we don't have semicha? We learned yesterday that that's why in every Beis Din there needs to be a person with semicha who has been imbued with this level of sanctity that comes all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu. Every Beis Din had to have that, except in certain cases, we'll deal with them today, also a Beis Din of 3 dealing with pure monetary disputes. But for the purpose of the legal system as discussed yesterday, you have to have a musmach. You need somebody who has semicha all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu. Today we don't have such people. Does that mean that the role of the legal system today is very different from the legal system that was given to us in the Torah? To understand this, we're going to see 2 principles in Tosfos, which lead us to an understanding of a machlokes between a difference of opinion between the Vilna Gaon and his great-grandfather, the Be'er HaGola, which will also illustrate my whole thesis, which I've discussed with you previously, as to the worldview of the Vilna Gaon in his parish of the Shulchan Aruch, how he treats the Shulchan Aruch differently from other Meforshim, and particularly from his own great-grandfather, the Be'er HaGola. We start off with the Tur. The Tur says, "V'dafke bizman sheyesh smicha." Everything we've talked about is dafke when there is smicha. When we have this unbroken tradition from Moshe, which we don't have today. But today that we don't have smicha, kol hadayanim betelim min haTorah. The very idea of judge that we discussed yesterday doesn't exist as it is in the Torah. The whole parsha of Dayanut, everything we learned yesterday, is talking about Dayanim who can be called Elohim, who can be given, so to say, Hashem's own name, because it's a continuity of Hashem's system. That's all what we discussed yesterday, but today we don't have that. And therefore, what is the authority of our legal system today, of the Dayanim of today? The shlichutayu de kamai avdinan. We do the shlichus. We are acting as agents of the original Dayanim, of the original Shoftim. That system that we talked about yesterday delegated authority to the Dayanim of today. And the Beis Yosef explains that it's not the Dayanim of Eretz Yisrael nowadays, because they also don't have smicha. We're going back to early times that the Dayanim, the Shoftim of that time, delegated to the legal system of today the right to do certain things. We've got to see what they can do. They can't do everything. The Tur goes on to explain, or this is in fact an earlier part of the Tur, that makes it clear what their role is. And this whole opening piece of the Tur in Choshen Mishpat is a piece that one should learn. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer al shlosha dvarim haolam kayam al adin v'al ha'emet v'al ha'shalom. We learned in Pirkei Avos that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the world stands on 3 things. The world exists for 3 things: din, law; emet, truth; and shalom, peace. Piresh Rabbeinu Yonah Zal. He quotes the Rabbeinu Yonah in Pirkei Avos. Ein perusho shebishvil gimel dvarim elu nivra haolam. It's not that the world was created for these 3 things, because it's already said al gimel dvarim haolam omeid, and those are different ones. There we're told it's Torah, avodah, and gemilut chasadim. That's why the world was created. The world was created so that we would learn Torah. The world was created that we would serve Hashem with tefillah and korbanot. The world was created so that we would do kindness one to the other. That's why the world was created. V'kan amar ha'olam kayam. Here we're talking about the continued existence of the world. Not why it was initially created, what was in Hashem's mind, but what is the energy that keeps the world going today. That is, perush achar shenivra mitkayim al yedei elu. After the world's been created, this keeps it going. She'al yedei hadayanim shedanim bein ish lechaveiro haolam kayam. But through the judges who decide matters of dispute between one man and another, that's how the world exists. So here we already see in the two, this is different from yesterday. That's not what we said yesterday was the role of the legal system. Here we're talking about the current legal system. The current legal system is to settle disputes. Ki imale hadin kol da'alim gvar, because if there wasn't proper justice, then everybody would it would be survival of the fittest, it would be law of the jungle, it would be a terrible situation. As the Gemara says, having mitpalel bishloma shel malchut, shilmale mora malchut, ishet re'u chayim lo. Even the secular government, even a non-Jewish government, you've got to daven every day, as we do in the shuls throughout the world, every week on Shabbos, for the well-being of governments, because whether one likes them or not, they keep the peace. And that's important. That's critically important. And I believe what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying is it's not just on these three things, on din, on emet, on shalom, three things. It's the synthesis of the three. That's what's critical. To be able to decide a matter of justice in a way that is not only just, but also true. And not only to decide it, but to result in an outcome that brings peace between people. That's what the world is to be able to synthesize all three. That the decisions of the Beit Din should be a synthesis of emet, shalom, and din. So that's their role. And therefore, how does this manifest? The Shulchan Aruch then paskins, based on this too. Bizman hazeh danim hadayanim dinei hodaot v'halvaot. So what can we decide today in our Batei Din? We can only do certain things. We can do matters of loans and indebtedness. And we can do a woman claiming her ksuba, her rights under the marital document. V'yirushot, and inheritance. Umatanot, and gift giving. Umazik mamon chaviro, and causing damage to somebody else's property. There's a car accident, one's claiming from the other. That can be decided by a court. Sheheim advarim hamutsuyim tamid v'yesh b'hem chitzron kis, because there are two conditions that the Chachomim gave to today's legal system to be able to intervene. It must be something where there is a claim of money. I've lost money, and I've come to Beis Din to recover money that I've lost. And the other is that there is shchiach. These are things that happen. They're frequent. It's not a rare case, and that includes, says the Shulchan Aruch, hodaot v'avaot uktevat isha v'yirushot u'matanot u'mazik mamon chaviro, different from what the Tur himself says, because the Tur says right at the very top, maskinan delo avdin an shlichutayu ela b'midi deshchicha v'itbei chitzron kis kagon hodaot v'avaot. For example, loans and admissions, those monetary matters, laws of contract and indebtedness, that's what you can judge. The Shulchan Aruch adds uktuvot isha and ksuva and inheritance and gift giving and damaging one from the other. That the Shulchan Aruch adds. Where does the Shulchan Aruch get that from? So we have it from, and now we can come to our Gemara at the bottom of Daf Beis Amud Beis, on the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. Bedinu delebayin ami mumchim. Really, in matters of monetary affairs, you should need mumchim. You should have at least one person who has semicha from Moshe Rabbeinu. And the reason we don't need these specialists is mishum de Rabbi Chanina, because of the principle of Rabbi Chanina, who said, on a similar matter but different, strictly speaking, whether you're deciding a civil matter or a criminal matter, you should require the same rigor of questioning witnesses. Because it says the legal system is one. So why did the Chachomim say you don't need Risha v'Chakira, you don't have to rigorously examine the witnesses when you're dealing with monetary matters? Because people will stop lending money, you'll turn off the flow of credit. Because it's going to be very hard. If I want to recover my money, I've got to find a Beis Din where there's a mumche who's got smicha from Moshe Rabbeinu. Where am I going to find such people? So let me not get involved. I'll never see my money again, and we'll damage the flow of credit. And in that way, we will slow down commerce. We will stop enabling commerce. So here we see an interesting principle, that the legal system, there is a bureaucracy to the legal system. Particularly the legal system of today, not the one we discussed yesterday. What we have to see is that bureaucracy doesn't interfere with the flow of commerce. Business must be allowed to take place. And we've got to balance these things all the time. We've got to balance the need for control, for governmental control, and the need for freedom of commerce. And that's part of what Chachamim do, and this is the case of Shelo tinol delet bifnei lavin. Don't make the bureaucracy so rigorous that it stops the flow of credit, stops the banking system, and it stops and thereby stops business. That would be a terrible thing. Says Rashi, and in the same way, just as we don't require the rigor of cross-examination for civil cases so as not to deter commerce, so also we remove the requirement of mumchim, that you have to have an individual on the Beis Din who has semicha from Moshe Rabbeinu. We remove that also so as not to interfere with the flow of credit and the flow of commerce. Now here comes an interesting thing that I started looking at as I was learning the Gemara, is this principle of shelo tinol delet bifnei lavin, so that we don't interfere with the flow of credit. Is that a commercial principle? Or is that an ethical principle? Is it we don't want to stop people doing the mitzvah of chesed and lending? We don't want to make that difficult for people. Or is this about commerce and business? And there's a big nafkamina, there's a big difference between these two approaches, and I will argue that is the difference between the two approaches in Tosfos, and that is the machlokes between the Sma and the Vilna Gaon, as we're going to see. Because says the Sma, on this law of Yesh Beim Chisaron Kis and all the cases that the Shulchan Aruch includes, although the Torah says only matters of contract, the Shulchan Aruch expands that to inheritance and gift and the ksuva of a woman. Gam b'yerushotu matanot lefi divrei haTovea yesh beim chisaron kis, because at least from the viewpoint of the claimant, there is a loss of money involved in all these cases. A woman says, I'm entitled to my ksuba, and the estate says, no, you've already been paid. And in the reason in all of these cases, why do we need situations where there's a chisaron kis, where there's a loss of money? Why do we need these situations? Because in all cases, kedei shelo yun al delit bifnei halavim, they're all governed by the principle of not deterring credit, expanded. Here the Tzma is something amazing. Expanded, uchedei sheyun al delit bifnei oseh avla, and to lock the door between malice, before the doers of malice, the perpetrators of harm. Just as we don't want to lock the door in front of creditors so as to facilitate commerce, so we do want to lock the door in front of potential criminals so as to facilitate commerce and good living. Those are the cases where we can do shlichus. And says the Sma, I believe this applies to other major issues, because we find that we're allowed to accept converts in this day. What about mumche? Don't we need a mumche to accept a convert? Even though it's not something that's that frequent, it's not happening all the time. Why is an ordinary Beis Din of ordinary hedyotot, ordinary people who've learnt the halachot, and they are dayanim, but they're not mumchim, they don't have smicha, why can they do conversions? We see in Babylon, they were doing issues around Gittin, all sorts of cases that don't fit into the classical definitions that the Torah gives, but the common denominator is you've got to intervene to stop malice, to stop people doing harm one to the other. So the principle of shelo tinol delet bifnei lavin is expanded by the Sma to discourage other acts of malice. Just as we don't want to stop people from doing good, so we want to stop people from doing evil, says the Sma. So, for example, the Sma would hold that the Beis Din has to get involved, a man who doesn't give his wife a get. You can't just say that's nothing we can do about that. We don't deal with those issues. According to the Sma, you would have to get involved. The Beis Din would have to get involved and apply pressure and put the person in chayrim, do whatever it needs to do. Because our role is, in order sheyun al delet bifnei oseh avla, we must close the door in the front of people who perpetrate malice, who plan to perpetrate malice. And the Be'er HaGola is written on the Shulchan Aruch. You'll remember he gives the sources of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't give us sources. He just gives us the din. We talked in our last year of Bava Basra about the difference between halachic process and halachic decisions. The Shulchan Aruch is just halachic decisions. Where do the decisions come from? The Be'er HaGola tells us where. The Be'er HaGola was the Vilna Gaon's great-grandfather. But he has another claim to fame. The Be'er HaGola's father was a Talmud of the Sma. Now, the Sma is very important. He is one of the first Perushim on the Shulchan Aruch. He writes on the whole Shulchan Aruch, and he writes on the Tur, the Prisha and Drisha on the Tur. And the Sma, as we see from his introduction to Shulchan Aruch, sees Tur and Shulchan Aruch as one body of work. And he links it all together, and that's how he understands the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch. And the Be'er HaGola is his Talmud's son. So the Sma was a Talmud of the Ramah and the Marshal, the first poskim, when we get into matters of halachic decision, the time of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, that next generation, is the Sma. And the Sma's Talmud's son is the Be'er HaGola. So the Be'er HaGola goes like the Sma. V'katava Sma v'hu adin l'shar inyanim gedolim. We can expand this principle to other matters, says the Be'er HaGola, in the name of his father's Rebbe, the Sma. But the Vilna Gaon, who is the Be'er HaGola's great-grandson, doesn't say that. He says, he only deals with the one principle of not interfering with the flow of credit. He doesn't expand it, he doesn't extend it. He stops over there. And I've explained to you before that the reason the Vilna Gaon writes what he writes, even though his great-grandfather has already done the job, if the purpose of the Vilna Gaon is to link the Shulchan Aruch to a source in the Gemara, his great-grandfather has already done that. Some people say it's an expansion of his great-grandfather's work. I don't believe that's correct. I believe that if you understand the Be'er HaGola as a son of the Talmud of the Sma clearly sees the Shulchan Aruch and the Tur as one body and explains the Shulchan Aruch in the context of the Tur and Beis Yosef. The Vilna Gaon sees the Shulchan Aruch as an independent work. The Beis Yosef is a perush on the Tur. The Shulchan Aruch is not a summary of the Tur. The Shulchan Aruch is an independent work. And the Vilna Gaon, once again, going back to our last shir on Bava Basra, the Vilna Gaon wants to interweave halachic process back into halachic decision. The Shulchan Aruch is halachic decision. In the time of the Vilna Gaon, if we look at the Hakdomas written by the Vilna Gaon's son and by Reb Chaim Volozhiner, we see what his intention was. He was concerned people were just learning Shulchan Aruch. Imagine what the Vilna Gaon would have thought today. They don't even learn Shulchan Aruch. They learn kitzurim of kitzurim, summaries of summaries of summaries. And that's halacha today. That's where your source of halacha is. People are getting, they don't even go to the Shulchan Aruch. There are Rabbonim who don't even open the Shulchan Aruch. And the Vilna Gaon was worried in his time that people were just looking at the Shulchan Aruch and making decisions. And he wanted to reintegrate halachic process into Shulchan Aruch, that if you are opening the Shulchan Aruch, it takes you back into methodology, it takes you back into the Gemara. So he treats the Shulchan Aruch as a work on its own, separate from Tur and Beis Yosef. And therefore the Vilna Gaon says over here, different from his great-grandfather, Shiloti noldelet b'fnei Lavin, because the role of the court, according to the Shulchan Aruch, as understood by the Vilna Gaon, different from the Tur, but as understood from the Vilna Gaon, is to intervene in argument and settle disputes. It's not the role of the court to deter malice. That's the role of the Rabbonim and the Mechanchim, the Rosh Yeshivas and the Rabbonim. They must teach people how to behave. Parents must teach their children how to behave. Communities must guide its members as how to behave, not the legal system's role. The legal system is to resolve conflict, to react. The legal system as we have it today, not in the time that we discussed yesterday, is a reactionary system, to react to arguments, to react to injustice. It's not to teach morality. And therefore he might argue it's not the legal system's responsibility to get involved. The man doesn't give a get to his wife. That's the Rabbonim must deal with that. That's not the legal system. The legal system doesn't prevent malice and deter malice. The legal system reacts to malice. And that's a difference in worldview between the Vilna Gaon and the Sma, and the Vilna Gaon's great-grandfather, and it's the way he understands the Shulchan Aruch, which is interesting now because the Sma goes on to say, it's strange, he says, in the Tur says a Beis Din has to have artifacts of enforcement sitting behind them, a whip and various things that demonstrate enforcement. He's got to have in the background. The Shulchan Aruch leaves that out. Ask the Sma, why does the Shulchan Aruch leave that out? Well, according to the Vilna Gaon, it's very simple why the Shulchan Aruch leaves it out. The Shulchan Aruch leaves it out because the Shulchan Aruch holds that's not the role of the Beis Din, is not to threaten people and is not to prevent wrongdoing because look, we've got whips and all sorts of things, you're going to get into trouble. That's not the role of the Beis Din. The role of the Beis Din is to paskin the halacha. When there's a claim, when somebody has a dispute and they come before the Beis Din, they resolve it. But it's not enforcement. And that's why the Shulchan Aruch leaves it out. The Vilna Gaon doesn't have the Sma's problem. But the Sma who holds that the Beis Din's job is to deter, why does he leave out the Torah's requirement that you've got to have these artifacts present? And these two views, we don't have time to go into it in detail, are expressed in the Tosfos on our Daf, where the Tosfos is the one who originates the Sma's idea in slightly different language. And he says, Kedei shetin'ol delet bifnei gazlanim. It's Tosfos who expands the principle from Hoda'ot v'halvaot to include Gezelot v'chabalot u'ktuvat isha v'yerushot u'matanot. That all comes from Tosfos. It's not the Shulchan Aruch who invented it. And Tosfos says the reason is Kedei shetin'ol delet bifnei gazlanim. That's where the Sma gets it from. It's not the Sma's own chidush. But the Vilna Gaon prefers the second answer of Tosfos. The Gzelot v'chabalot nami bo drisha v'chakira. No, we narrow it down only to the cases where there really is a matter of linol delet bifnei lavin, where credit is an element. Because that's all the Gemara says. Narrow it down to what the Gemara actually says. The Gemara says, tinol delet bifnei lavin. The Gemara does not say to lock the door in front of perpetrators of malice. So stick to what the Gemara says. The second answer of Tosfos is much tighter in its understanding of the Gemara, and that's where the Vilna Gaon goes. So whereas according to the Sma and the Be'er HaGola, the role of the legal system is to introduce and protect morality and ethics in the community, according to the Vilna Gaon, the role of the Beis Din, and these are principles we'll use throughout Sanhedrin and later on in Makos, the role of the Beis Din is to respond to claims and to resolve disputes. It's the role of educators, parents, and Rabbonim to teach people how to behave. These are two different functions. And we see how the Vilna Gaon understands the Shulchan Aruch as different to the way his great-grandfather and the Sma understand the Shulchan Aruch, leading us to two different understandings of the role of the legal system in our current system that prevails today.